Now, just a little warning here at the start that there will be spoilers in this video for the latest episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that being the third episode. So if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want anything ruined, it's a really good time to click away. Okay, so I'll start this out by simply saying this was another good episode, and I'm highly enjoying this series overall, and I think we're moving along at a good pace now that we've hit the midway point. And I have to say, probably my favorite part of this episode was the inclusion or return of Zemo, or should I say Baron Zemo, since he's now taken on his full comic book name or title, and was revealed to be a filthy rich baron with private jet and all. Which, yes, does tie into his comic book origins a lot more, where he is also a true baron, though he was German and not Sokovian there. However, I did kind of like the idea that he was something more of a regular, everyday person, which Civil War kind of presented him as, even though, yes, he was ex-military and special forces and all that good stuff. Still, especially in that final monologue that he gives to Black Panther, he felt more like just some guy who had lost his wife and child because of the Avengers, albeit indirectly, not that it mattered to him, and then he came up with and carried out this brilliant plan to destroy them from within. Which is really kind of both crazy yet intriguing when you stop and think about it, and goes along with what Sam sort of joked about in the last episode about how they're always fighting aliens, androids, and wizards. They fight all these huge, insanely powerful, and otherworldly threats and always come out on top, yet it's a random guy with a grudge who actually beats them, or again pulls them apart from within. Nevertheless, I'm certainly fine to see him become more like his original comic book self, even putting on the purple mask at one point, which is really his defining physical characteristic in the comics. Here he puts it on just because, I guess, or to hide his identity maybe, whereas in the comics he wore it because his face was horribly disfigured after falling into a vat of adhesive X, which, as the name kind of implies, is like super gorilla glue and can bond with pretty much anything. And speaking of Zemo here, I wasn't all too surprised to see our heroes break him out of jail, even though you'd really think they'd get into a lot of trouble for that, especially someone who had just been pardoned for some pretty serious crimes. Even though the guards at the facility Zemo was being kept in didn't seem to suspect them, they thought it was the hugest coincidence ever that they'd shown up on the same day Zemo escaped. But then again, the crazy way he did escape, how that was all set up, was pretty incredible, so yeah, maybe they were clueless, I don't know. Anyway, though, them breaking Zemo out didn't surprise me. What did is that Zemo never turned on them, despite having opportunities to do just that, though I'm sure by the end he probably will turn on them. And I'm glad he didn't yet. I really enjoyed the dynamic he brought to this little group. I also really kind of liked that the first thing he did when he saw Bucky was say the old control or activation words, just in case they still worked. And then later in that episode, in the club scene, he sort of puts him back into Winter Soldier mode anyway. And the concern Sam shows when that happens is great as well. And so yeah, I think Zemo is a good, interesting character and a good addition to the crew. A good sort of third wheel to balance things out between Sam and Bucky. Though I thought that third wheel might end up being Sharon Carter, and it might still end up being her in the future of the series. But she only briefly shows up in this episode, helps them out because of a promise they made to help her out. And then she's seen getting into a car and telling someone that they have a problem. Now, could this mean she's working with or for the power broker? Maybe. She seems pretty upset that her crimes weren't forgiven, like others had their crimes forgiven. That since she wasn't one of the cool kids, she wasn't a superhero or isn't a superhero. So she wasn't pardoned, but instead had to go on the run or into hiding. That she was left unforgiven and or forgotten, which I suppose could make her bitter enough to start working with the bad guys. Now, I'm not sure that's the direction they want to take her character in, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's secretly working with some other government agency or something like S.H.I.E.L.D. if they're still a thing in this version of the MCU, and if she's trying to clear her name or get in their good graces so that she can be forgiven and to come back home. I mean, again here, that is or was supposedly the reason she helped Sam and Bucky in the first place. She wants to be pardoned, she wants to go home. Either way, she's in Madripoor now, which no is not a real country, but has been seen in Marvel Comics for years now, for decades really, and it was cool to finally see it in the MCU. And speaking of interesting character directions, I kind of thought we might be showing the Flag Smashers and their leader, Karli Morgenthau, in a bit of a different light in this episode. I thought we might get a bit more of a sympathetic angle with them going forward. I mean, clearly I think the Power Broker is the big bad guy or overarching villain of the whole thing, and then there's the new Captain America, who I think will take a turn for the worse later on in this series, and more on him in just a second. But nope, that won't be happening for the Flag Smashers after blowing up a building full of people, even though Carly's right-hand man did seem pretty shocked and appalled by the whole thing, so maybe they'll turn on her? As for our new Captain America, or John Walker, well, he wasn't in this episode all too much other than to show just how frustrated he's becoming and how much pressure he's probably feeling at his new role or title. I love the part where the guy spits in his face and he snapped and screamed at him, "Do you know who I am?" Because that is something that Steve Rogers would have never ever said or done in a million years, and really shows the difference between the two Captain Americas. And so quite clearly, I think his turn is being set up. As I talked about in my previous review, he wants so badly to be a hero, to be like the previous or real Captain America, that he'll end up getting his hands on and taking the super soldier serum, and then as it does, it'll enhance the person he truly is. It'll bring out his darker side, and then there will be a final showdown between him and Sam and Bucky, after which Sam will take up the shield and finally become Captain America. Also in this episode, the whole bank loan thing from the first episode does sort of come back into play. It gets used as the oldest trick in the new playbook here in the cell phone era, as Sam's sister, of course, calls him at the worst moment possible, which ends up giving them away because I guess no one's allowed to get a call during a meeting like this, or it's disrespectful not to mute your phone beforehand. Though yes, in all fairness, she did suspect something was up with him, that he wasn't the real smiling tiger. She made a comment about his height after all. But I don't know if getting a call should just automatically be seen as a sign that something is amiss. Everybody gets calls, even bad guys. And in all reality, Sam should have tried to play it off as his business is his own, that he's not going to be putting it on speaker because he doesn't want others to hear what he has to say to his business partners or whatever it might be. But whatever, it is what it is, and there are always going to be contrivances in stories. In fact, a fictional story is just a series of contrivances, and a good fictional story is one that masks or hides that fact and makes it feel like everything is natural. Oh, and yes, for the record, Conrad Mack, or the Smiling Tiger, is a real Marvel character, which you probably suspected if you didn't already know. Other than all that, not too much else to talk about with this episode, other than maybe Io showing up at the very end of it. And she's basically one of T'Challa's elite or royal bodyguards, and she's of course obviously not too happy to see that Zemo has been let out of prison, since he's the man that killed T'Challa's father and plenty of other people as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the talk goes between her and Bucky next week. I also have to wonder if she's been sent by T'Challa himself, and if there's any possibility at the cameo to end all cameos in the series, if we could see Black Panther being played by the late, great Chadwick Boseman himself, even just briefly, like her contacting him or giving him an update for instructions or something along those lines. And I can only imagine how people would respond to that, how bittersweet something like that would be. And I'm not saying this is even a rumor I've heard or anything like that. I just know this series started filming many months before his death, so it's not impossible. I mean, Black Panther is or was a big part of Zemo's story in Civil War. Again, Zemo killed his father and had him consumed with vengeance. And so I suppose the original idea here, or one of them, could have been for this series to tie into or even set up something in Black Panther 2. So again, who knows? Either way, to quickly sum it up here, it was another good episode, and as I've said in my reviews of the last two, it feels just like watching a Captain America movie, minus the Steve Rogers being in it part, of course. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought about this latest episode and or the series overall so far. As good as you hoped for and expected, or not. Either way, leave a comment below and let's talk some Marvel. And until next time, thanks for watching.